the initiatives that happened over this 230th year celebration a very interesting one. There's a very interesting connection, and I think it's a very powerful one that's been made. And I think you all will appreciate hearing from the collective Canadian efforts in this session. We will start with Dr. Afua Cooper, who will set the stage, and then Carol and Carol Millet's team and others would follow, along with productions from the Black History Societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for all your efforts and for the invitation. I wanna say a big good morning, good afternoon, good night. But a big greetings to the Mayor, Her Excellency Yvonne Akisoyer. Thanks to you and your office for this wonderful invitation to participate in Freetown 230. I also want to send greetings or bring greetings to all my colleagues, to all my friends, and to all my family members on this call. My name is Dr. Afua Cooper. I'm a historian of the African diaspora and of Black Canadian history. I teach at Dalhousie University, which is in Nova Scotia, Halifax, Canada. I am also currently the principal investigator for a new project called A Black People's History of Canada. So let me situate myself a bit. Originally, I'm Jamaican. I was born and raised in Jamaica. I do have some links to Sierra Leone. On my mother's side, we are descended from Trelawney Maroons. And, you know, so there's a connection with Nova Scotia, Sierra Leone, and Trelawney, the Trelawney Maroons of Jamaica. I was actually born in Westmoreland, which is not Trelawney. Westmoreland is another parish. But some of the Trelawney Maroons during that conflict with the British had escaped to other parishes or fled to other parishes. And so my maternal ancestors had fled to Westmoreland. The family continued. The Black Loyalist story has been near and dear to my heart for many years. And as part of my scholarship, as part of my work, today I'm going to speak on Thomas Peters, will contextualize his story, his history in the wider Black Loyalist story. In 2014, I did a residency at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. I am also a poet, and the museum had this artistic residency, and I did a week there. The museum is in Halifax. And one of the things that you had to do, well, it was really neat, was that you had to select an object or an artifact that the museum had in its collection and write something about it. Either you write a play or you choreograph a dance or a poem. So I wrote a poem, and the object that I used was that painting of the 15 ships that the Black Loyalists, the almost 1,200 people on which they traveled to Freetown in Sierra Leone, and they left Halifax Harbour on January 15, 1792. So that painting was my inspiration. I mulled over it for the first 2 days, taking notes, just diving and delving into that history. And then after, you know, by the fourth day, you had to have something done. So the poem was written and it was performed, and I traveled to different schools, high schools, primary schools, performing the poem, telling the story of the 15 ships and the immigrants who were on the ships. So that was in 2014. And subsequently, we did a website called Black Halifax, on which that video poem is located, and also 12 other stories about Black experiences in Halifax, including a poem done by Valerie Mason-John specifically on Thomas Peters, where she channeled Thomas Peters. So it's been a work in progress, my engagement with the Black Loyalist history, with the Black Loyalist story. So the thing to know is that Black history in general in Canada has been blacked out, has been wiped out. It's not something that's taught in schools. It's not something that's braided within the curriculum. So you have this immense story where 1,200 people picked up and left Canada because of racism, because of colonial violence, and went to Sierra Leone. They would rather, take to the high seas than stay in Canada and experience the racism that they were experiencing. They left. They said, enough of this, we're leaving, and they left. This is not something that's chronicled in the social studies or the history curriculum in Nova Scotia or anywhere in Canada. Yes, some teachers may teach it, and Ms. Hudson is coming on and she can talk to that, but it's not something that braided within. You don't have to learn it. Even Black people themselves don't know it, more or less. So Thomas Peters was this extraordinary individual. And I think, Barbara, you said I could share my screen. So let's see, I just wanna show you guys a few artifacts, a few documents on Thomas Peters, this individual. So Thomas Peters was a Black loyalist. He fought during the Revolutionary War. I don't need to go into that. That has been talked about. Where the British, issued this memo, first with Dunmore of Virginia and then Clinton, where they issued this memo to African-American enslaved people saying, if you join us, we're gonna win the war, and after the war, we'll give you your freedom. You're free to settle in the United States, the 13 colonies, because they thought they were going to win the war, but they didn't win the war. So Thomas Peters was one of these thousands, actually, something like historians are now saying that at least 100,000 enslaved people fled to the British standards. And he was one of them. He was in the Cape Fear area of North Carolina. He fled with other people. General Clinton had ships on the Cape Fear River, and Peters, who was working as a millwright on the Campbell plantation in Wilmington, Delaware, fled to Clinton's army, and served as one of the Black pioneers. This was a provincial corps that was founded by Clinton, by the British military, for Black people, for Black men. And Peters rose through the ranks in the Black pioneers to the status of sergeant. He became a sergeant by the time the war ended. We know he's a sergeant. There were another sergeant, Murphy Steele. Murphy Steele also went to Sierra Leone. So Peters was a Black pioneer, and he fought with the British. Originally, before he endured enslavement in North Carolina, he was in Louisiana. We know that Thomas Peters originally came from Nigeria. He endured the Middle Passage. He was probably a Yoruba, endured the Middle Passage, ended up in Louisiana. So he probably spoke French by the time he came to North Carolina. His frequent escapes, or his escapes attempt, sort of inspired his Louisiana owner to sell him north, because he said, this guy just keeps running away. I can't deal with him. Let me sell him. So we find Thomas now serving as a Black pioneer. And at the end of the war, Treaty of Paris, 1783, the British military lost the war. So what did they do? Well, some of the generals on the ground were humane, Guy Carleton, and they said, look, we made a promise to these people, we're going to keep it. If they had served in the military for a year or more, we will issue them certificates of freedom so they can leave New York or Charleston, South Carolina, or St. Augustine, Florida, because these were some of the points from which Black loyalists left to sail to Eastern Canada, or to go to the Bahamas or the West Indies, or the UK. Some of them even ended up in Germany, by the way. And so we have Thomas Peters' certificate, and he says, it says that the bearer hereof, Thomas Peters, Sergeant Thomas Peters of the Black Pioneer Corps, has served His Majesty since the year 1776. So 1776 to 1783. So he's been in the military for 6-7 years. So, you know, this flotilla of ships left New York Harbor. British lost the war. They're evacuating their people. They evacuated something like 35,000 white people to Eastern Canada. There were these 3,000 and more Black people, including members of the Black pioneers and their families. And this is the rub, though. This is the rub. Many of the white loyalists were allowed to take their enslaved Africans with them. So you had free Black people like Peters and his wife, Sarah, and his 2 children, then Clary and John, going to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. But, you know, and some of those ships were also enslaved Black people. So that's kind of like the hidden story. So they leave, they go off to Nova Scotia, they arrive in Annapolis Royal in the valley. But guess what? The British reneged on their promise, the promise to give them land, rations to tide them over the time, clothing, blankets, so on and so forth. The whites got all of this. The promise was made for 3 years. Peters' people, like in Digby, which is on the north side of the province of Nova Scotia, they only got rations for 3 months, right? So in many of these communities, like Birchtown and so on, when you read Boston King's narrative, people are starving. People are starving. Some people even went off to sea as sailors, and they did the best they could. So the British really reneged on its promise. And then you had the white people in Nova Scotia who were viciously racist, who only saw Black people as slaves and wanted these free Black people now to be in this subservient position of slavery or indentureship or sharecropping. So Peters engaged in a fight with many of his cohort, people like Murphy Steele, I mentioned, they petitioned colonial governments, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. He crossed back and forth. He rallied the community. And finally in 1790, after 6-7 years of residence in these 2 colonies, the people there sent Peters to England, to London, to plead the cause, to say to the king or the king's representative, hey, we have been tricked. Not only have we been tricked, but they have reinstituted slavery in Nova Scotia. They're kidnapping many of our people. There are race riots. They have burnt down our communities in Birchtown and Shelburne. For example, they have instituted these anti-Black bylaws. They banned Negro frolics in Birchtown and Shelburne really. So Black people couldn't have parties, they couldn't have dances. They said they're making too much noise, they have to turn down the noise. So they were under surveillance and their lives were circumscribed in so many ways. Whilst in London, Peters met with his old commissioner or his old captain, George Martin, who introduced him, hooked him up with General Clinton. General Clinton, if you remember, was a general under whom he served in when they were campaigning in the former 13 colonies. And Peters presented a petition. He also met Granville Sharp, and he met members of the London's Black community. And he presented a commission to a petition rather, to the Secretary of State, Grenville, and then later on Dundas. And basically he said, you know, things are awful. The governors on the ground in Nova Scotia have really been discriminating terribly against our people. We wish to leave. The Sierra Leone company was forming at that time. The former St. George's company was forming. It was agreed on that those in Canada who wished to leave would go to Sierra Leone. So this is how this arrangement was made. So Peters travels back to Canada. They also sent John Clarkson, the younger brother of Thomas Clarkson, the famous abolitionist, to lead the exodus, which became a source of conflict because Peters was the one doing all the work, the groundwork, and then they send this young 27-year-old guy. Peters was about, you know, almost 54. They sent John Clarkson to lead the exodus. He doesn't know Nova Scotia, doesn't know the people, but he's white and he has the force of the British, of the imperial authorities behind him. So anyway, Peters goes back, he organizes communities in both provinces. Clarkson went down to Shelburne and Birchtown. And then by December 1793, now you have almost 1,200 people gathered in Halifax, waiting to go on the ship. But so by the way, the British government said they would pay for this exodus, outfit the ships. There was a hospital ship. And so these people gathered in Halifax. And I just want to show here the last petition that Peters wrote with one of his colleagues, David Eastman. And it was to Clarkson to say, look, this is our last Christmas in America. It's stated there, our last Christmas in America. We're asking for some fresh beef so we may have a Christmas dinner. You know, really very poignant. I actually, you know, feel the sentiments in this letter. And you know, the fresh beef was granted, and December 23rd, in January 15, they all left on these ships, which this is a picture of the ship arriving in Freetown. So Thomas Peters, we see him as a Black Power advocate, a civil rights leader, a one who resisted slavery in so many ways, resisted slavery, resisted racism. You see, he had the agency, he and his community. Peters was a community builder and a community advocate. When we think of Peters' role in history, I think of him as a Black Atlantic revolutionary who was instrumental in the Black freedom movement in at least 4 countries, in Canada, in the United Kingdom, in what became the United States, and of course, in Sierra Leone. So that is, you know, on the day Thomas Peters died, suffice it to say, we all know the story when the Black Loyalists from Canada arrived in Sierra Leone. Again, the British reneged on their promise. The whites, John Clarkson, wanted to rule in an autocratic way. And, you know, Peters went at him head to head. And Peters died. He died from malaria shortly after he arrived in Freetown. But others took up the cudgel. So here is a document, or part of it, of the Beaverhoot petition. Henry Beaverhoot presented this petition to Clarkson on the same day Thomas Peters died, June 26, 1792. So I'm saying, did Peters have a hand in crafting this petition? And Beaverhoot is saying, we wish to be governed. We want to be part of the government. You promised this in Halifax. You promised this in London, that we were going to be part of the government, not to be discriminated against once we get to Sierra Leone. We couldn't get the land. We're not part of the government. So others took up the cudgel, like Henry Beaverhoot and Isaac Anderson and Harry Washington and John Kizell and all those folks. So I linked Peters and all those folks, you know, to the Black Atlantic revolutionary tradition. Here's an image of the last battle of the Haitian Revolution called La Bataille de Vertieres, the Battle of Vertieres, which was the battle that the Haitian people kicked out the French from the island. And in fact, as many of you know, the people like Clarkson and Wilberforce or describing the Nova Scotians or the Black Loyalists as Jacobins. You know, it's as if they were born and trained in Paris. So we know that they had this revolutionary spirit in them. And the whites, John Clarkson and his colleagues, did not like that. They wished them to remain subservient. So these are, you know, some of the identities of Thomas Peters, and I'm happy to say that I was in Freetown in 2013 and took a picture there at the base of Thomas Peters' statue. I did not know this celebration was going to happen, but it is wonderful. And I'm going to end there. And I thank you all for your kind attention, and happy birthday, Freetown. Happy birthday to you all. And let's do this again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cooper. It's been a pleasure since we started to correspond. It looks like we are on a journey ourselves to do more. And that more that we want to do, it's going to need to include everybody and the multicultural spirit of Canada to get it done. So thank you very much. But I'm going to take off from the last note you mentioned, that Henry Beaver, who made the last petition, most people don't know, but he was from the Caribbean. And that's the segment, and it'll give me opportunity to let people know that, remind people that there were people from the Caribbean, the 1,196 ships who were enslaved in those areas and made their way to Freetown. And this ties into what the mayor has actually asked us to make sure we include everybody. And the way that was done this year was through the initiative that Africans and Caribbeans are putting together to host the first 6-day carnival festival in Sierra Leone, in Freetown, and from December 28th to January 2nd. It's going to be a fusion. It's going to be a homecoming, fusion of culture. It's going to be a homecoming. It's going to be a reunion. And just yesterday, she was saying a taste of that was given, where the two cultures just nicely, in a very warm way and hearty way, kicked off this. And it's been received very well on all levels of government. And you could feel the city is looking forward to such a homecoming. So again, these stories and the heritage information all around the Caribbean will also be shared and be exhibited, will be also promoted during that period. So just to let you know, the celebration this 230th year is about connecting everyone, and that's the mayor's request. So it's a fine time to move to continue the Canadian contribution. As if you're following the story, you could tell that it is about the time the community, after 9 years, made a decision to leave in 15 ships to Sierra Leone. And we have and Karen Hodson here, and Carol Millett, and others who are going to take us through the next segment that has to do with around the theme of what this exodus and this arrival means.
All right, so good afternoon, and thank you. And I also wanted to say congratulations on the 230th anniversary of the exodus of the Black Loyalists, and the anniversary in terms of going to Freetown, Sierra Leone. And we're very privileged to be part of this celebration. And like you said, it's a part of connecting to our history, to our rich history. And this shows the strength that we have across the diaspora as well as within Africa. And so today, I have some young students here that what we want to do is talk about the hashtag 1792 project. And it began with a message in the bottle in September. And what we were aiming to do is to make sure, it's just the beginning. So it was the beginning of how we could tell a story that has not been told. And how could we make sure that others knew about this deep history that has been left out of our curriculum, that hasn't been written in. And so we wanted to make sure that we could engage not just ourselves, but also young students within the educations of Nova Scotia, across the province, so that they could take part and learn more about the Black Loyalists of 1,196 individuals who left on 15 ships. And some of the students have never heard about this. They heard about the migrations, but they haven't heard about individuals getting on, Black Loyalists getting on and leaving this province of Nova Scotia because of contracts that were broken, promises that weren't kept, unemployment, racism that what Dr. Afua spoke about earlier. So what we did is that we made a presentation to the Executive Council in December. And we came on board. They actually did some proclamation where Carol will speak a little bit about that. But through Catherine Winkler, introduced us to this project in terms of 1792. We decided to call ourselves that so that we would never forget the year, this important year of when the Black Loyalists left to go to Sierra Leone. And then we want to tell why they left and the conditions that they endure here in Nova Scotia. And so we began on this journey, this educational journey to fulfill our mind and to make sure that we gain knowledge and that we share this knowledge and this story, this rich story across the province. And so I wrote one of the letters as the principal of Auburn Drive High School. I wrote a letter, and then from that letter at a meeting there, I decided that this would be something else that we need to get the students involved as well. And then through that, we decided that we want to make sure that every seafarer that left would receive a letter. And so the letter was basically just talking about my experience, but also, you know, how the seafarers who left, what were some of those conditions, you know, trying to understand, you know, that they left this land. And then also to talk about what happened here, what is still happening here in regards to racism or systemic issues. And then to talk about their resilience and that talk about the spirit of hope, and then to create that hope within them so that they would understand that from them as our ancestors that we continue on to live out their legacy and that we want to pass it down to our children. And so I will now call on one of our students, Zay, who's going to actually read her letter, because what our goal is to do is that even though we're here in Nova Scotia, Canada, and Freetown, Sierra Leone is having a celebration, we're celebrating with you, we want to extend that branch so that way we could have letters actually go from Nova Scotia to Sierra Leone, and then maybe have opportunity to connect somehow where folks from Sierra Leone can also write to us as well, and we can write to them. But then we also created, the book of letters. And within this, we're documentary anyone who actually decides to give a letter to put their names down. So their names is going to be written within this book of letters. And this will become part of the history as well. And through all of that, then individuals can see their name that would be written down and placed in probably, hopefully, the Maritime Museum within Nova Scotia, but they will become part of history. And so now I'll call on Zay Smith. She's one of the students here from Auburn. She's actually going to read her letter.
Hi. So I'm going to read my letter. Dear Black Loyalists in Sierra Leone, the British were badly outnumbered and were in despite Native people for the war. With that being said, they offered you freedom and land if you fought the Americans on their behalf. As you were jammed on a 3-month-long boat journey, watching your people die from starvation, illness, and being tortured, how did you survive that? Over 30,000 of you escaped to join the British. Even with that, you still faced hostility, racial segregation, low-paying jobs, and inequality when arriving in Nova Scotia. As the defeat became inevitable, you now, 3 Black Loyalists, were evacuated to Nova Scotia with the other Loyalists. The land they promised you was never given in the ways you would ever imagine. Your land was very rocky and poor soil, which prevented farming. Most of you chose a new life in Sierra Leone, away from the cold lands of Nova Scotia. Now in 2021, many Loyalists are living in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. You helped create heavily influenced politics and culture in Canada. All of your families deserve to be heard and known worldwide. You fought for the British and never received what you risked your life for. Sincerely, Zay, a fellow Black Loyalist.
Thank you, Zay. And before I continue on, so Zay is a grade 11 student here at Auburn Drive High School, where I'm the principal here. And that was one of the tasks that we actually want him to do, is to write a letter to begin part of that educational journey. We feel that this is a wonderful opportunity for our students to be able to speak about what they feel is happening here today, so that what would they tell the seafarers who would travel across those waters? What would they say to them? What do they want them to know about what they're encountering right here? So I'm going to get another student who's going to read her letter, Samira Hudson-Ash, and she's also a grade 11 student as well.
Hello. To a Black Loyalist headed to freedom. I'm writing to you as you aboard the Morning Star. Is there fear running through your veins? Can you feel your heart beat through your chest? Are you hoping for the best but preparing for the worst? I know you are anxious. I cannot imagine traveling that far away from your family. I hope your journey to Sierra Leone will be safe. You were promised land, jobs, and way more opportunity when you came to Nova Scotia, but you did not receive what you were guaranteed. The hardship and dedication you have building your own land from nothing is remarkable and breathtaking. As I look back to the dream of freedom, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about racism. Although I am a female living through a global pandemic in 2021 that is allowed to go to school every day with different people, racism is still alive in Nova Scotia. Sometimes I do not understand why people hate. I feel privileged to go to school even though it is a pandemic. There are restrictions and expectations. Getting an education would not be possible without your plight for freedom. I would say we would have come far because of your austerity. We still have a long way to go and we are stronger for that. I think about my little cousins and wonder if they will endure the same racism that exists because of the color of our skin. I think about the Black Lives Matter movement and what took place in 2020 with George Floyd's killing. It brings sadness to my eyes that we are fighting for these rights. Nevertheless, we are still thriving in communities of Cherrybrook, Lakeland, and North Preston and East Preston because of your united as one group. I love my community of Preston. It is also as known as Preston Township. It is my community. I feel safe, happy, and free to be myself. I hope that you will feel free once you reach Sierra Leone. It would be great to hear how you were treated after such distance. I hope you were respected and arrived safe to Sierra Leone. Sincerely, Samara.
So thank you, Samira, and thank you, Zay, for your letters there. And I think that one of the things that Dr. Afua spoke about was that we have this rich local history that is not being taught within our school, and that our students need to know about their connection and about the motherland. And just to hear about the ongoing celebrations that are happening within Freetown, Sierra Leone now, it actually thrills my heart, you know, to go back to the motherland and to be part of such an event and to be part of history. And so this is a way for our young children to actually address inequities and to speak from, you know, from their heart of what they see, and a way for others to listen, but also to take action, and which is very critical in terms of what we do. That we need to be mindful that we're impacting the lives of young people. And so this is a way to carry on the book of letters and to carry on the legacy and the history of the stories. And we want to move forward in terms of this ongoing collaboration. We are privileged to be part of that, part of history and part of this partnership. And so we look forward working with the mayor of Freetown, as well as Adrian and others, to continue to build on what we've started. And so thank you for allowing us to share the stories from the students there. At this time now, I will call on Carol, who will speak about another part of the initiative that we have with Project 1792 is proclamations.
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone, and happy 230th anniversary to everyone in Freetown and Sierra Leone in general. The proclamation project that we have initiated is to call our elected municipal leaders to account, really, to be leaders, provide leadership in acknowledging the history of the Black Loyalists in Nova Scotia. It has been erased by and large, certainly among white people, and we want to rectify that and ensure that all our elected officials are aware of this history, aware of the reason why 1,196 Black Loyalists decided that they could no longer live in a place, Nova Scotia, and survive and thrive. So they left in the middle of the winter. If anybody's been to Nova Scotia in the middle of the winter, you know what a difficult choice that would have been to make. So I would like to read, so we have sent a request to all of the municipalities in Nova Scotia to sign a proclamation which would do several things. One, it acknowledges that history and the history of racism, which forced people to leave here. It also calls on the municipalities to proclaim January the 15th annually as a day of commemoration to the 15 ships that sailed to Sierra Leone. We also call on our municipal leaders to, in fact, fight against racism so that it doesn't happen again, and to deal with the present day racism that still exists in Nova Scotia. I would like to read the proclamation signed by Mayor Savage of Halifax, Nova Scotia, who was, Halifax is where, as you know, people left from. Do I have time for this, to read the whole proclamation?
I think so.
Okay. Proclamation, Day of Black Loyalist Exodus, 15 ships to Sierra Leone, January the 15th, 2022. Whereas January 15th, 2022 is the 230th anniversary of 15 ships departing the Harbour of Halifax in 1792, and that the conditions and causes that led to the exodus of 1,196 self-liberated Black Loyalists were condition of abject institutionalized racism, and this departure took place at the height of the transatlantic chattel slave trade, one of the cruelest chapters in the history of humanity. Whereas people of African descent have been a part of Canadian society since the early 1600s, and that their enslavement occurred on this land for centuries, and that the Black Loyalist departure is linked to the failure of institutional, political, and societal will to fulfill the promises that were made to the communities that left for Sierra Leone. Whereas we are committed to promote histories such as the 15 ships to Sierra Leone that often have been left in a vacuum of erasure, the resources provided for well-known monumentation have historically been funded at the expense of those erasures. Whereas we continue to recognize the ongoing significance of the UN Decade of African Descent and the importance of recognizing the history of Black Loyalists in Nova Scotia, and how all communities in Nova Scotia continue to be affected by the historic rift of the Black community. Whereas we recognize that secure housing and land was promised to these earlier settlers, and very few received what was owed. No one received the promised 100 acres of land for each head of household, despite petitions by Thomas Peters. For many Black Loyalists, shared Mi'kmaq knowledge was key to survival in the first winters. Thereby be it resolved that I, Mayor Mike Savage, on behalf of Regional Council, do hereby declare January 15th, 2022, the day of Black Loyalist Exodus, 15 ships to Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Carol, for the proclamation. So now at this time, is Catherine online? Okay, so Catherine Winkler was going to be online, but maybe she's not. And she was the original initiator of this. She's a former educator in terms of the project of the Black Loyalists. And she basically brought individuals in, and she always talks about how this is a collective project. And so with that understanding, if you think about the Ngozi Saba principle and being Ujima, that collective way of doing things, being and saying. And so as part of that collective, we became part of that project. And so each of us are taking on part of it. And the part I've taken on is doing the hashtag 79.2, the book of letters, and Carol working on the municipalities. We have a person who works on the social media part, Megan and Catherine. And then we have Dr. Lynn Jones, who could not be here, but she's just like a Queen Mother as well in terms of providing us with guidance and direction. And so that collectivism, we actually try to extend it among the students as well so that they can embrace and encourage them as well to embrace the story, embrace the wisdom that exists within our own information that we don't know about. So that story of Black Loyalists, Freetown, Sierra Leone is part of our history. And we are encouraged by the presence of everyone on the call today. And we want to continue on. So our goal is 1,196. I only have 300 letters, but there are more coming in because we said it's a year long. It's not going to happen within tomorrow, but we've extended that so that people know throughout the year. So I've collected 300 letters so far. More letters will be shared tomorrow from the elementary schools, as well as drawings and paintings will be shared tomorrow with the mayor. Well, I just want to say thank you for Adrian for inviting us, and we look forward for building on this relationship. And I know that it's just started, but when you come to Nova Scotia, you know, this is home. And for me, Africa is home as well. My intention hopefully is to get to Sierra Leone. I've been to other parts of West Africa, Ghana. And when I went there for the celebration at that time, they said, you know, welcome brothers and sisters to back home. That's what I felt like, brothers and sisters. I felt like I never left. So I appreciate all that we're doing to make sure that the work is not forgotten in terms of the history is not forgotten. So thank you, Adrian, and also to members of the hashtag 1792 committee.
Thank you very much. I think that's shared equally by us. I think there's not enough foundation has been put, and the bridge will be built this year across several initiatives. So I'm coming up to, like I said, the summer. Look out for me. Okay. So thank you very much. Lovely connection. The letters, lovely connections, and you could tell history has been made in some ways. The book of letters, and even what happened in Freetown this 230th year.